we're back. We're going to talk about the AJHL. I know we left off with the Bobcats, but we'll keep moving forward and talk about the AJHL North Division Final. The South has already been solved. That was determined by Drumheller last week, but it keeps going on with two teams here, arguably the top two teams in the country. You have Fort Mac and you have Spruce Grove. Spruce Grove coming back from a 3-1 deficit to force this Game 7, heading back to the Grove. Guys, where do you see this playing out? Who has the better advantage? And also, Brennan Saulnier and Hayden Hayes not going to be in the lineup for the Oil Barons because of suspension. So, with that said, who gets the advantage?
I'm going to give it to Fort Mac. I said they were going to win this series right after the Bobcat one. Just, they've been in Game 7 before. It kind of seems history's kind of repeating itself. They're up 3-1. They lose the next two games and win in Game 7. So they've been there. They're a skill enough team, even with Saulnier and the other guy out with suspension. So I think Fort Mac will take like a 3-2 game maybe.
Yeah, for Gore Thibodeau's team to lose 3 straight games, I can't see it happening. You got to bet Fort Mac on it. Trying to listen to the game on the internet, and it's difficult because you don't get a real good perspective on it because the play-by-play guy from Fort Mac is so negative towards his team when they're losing. Doesn't give credit to the team that's beating them, but gives a lot of discredit to the Oil Barons. So it's really hard to get a good feel of the game when you're listening to it, but talking to a couple of parents that were there, that Spruce Grove played well, but Fort Mac is a team that's a bit of a sleeping giant, and I think the Giant's going to awaken tonight.
So you don't see Kenny Cameron making the same thing he did in Game 6, stealing the show virtually. You still feel that?
Well, you got Cameron versus Gillette, so you're going to take Gillette for sure.
Yeah.
He's the goalie of the year, so and he shut out the Bobcats in Game 7. So look for another big performance from the whole team.
Yeah, I just can't see Spruce Grove beating Fort Mac 3 straight times. The hockey gods aren't going to smile on you one more time. I just really think it's going to be Fort Mac's game. Fort Mac gets out of Fort Mac. They play on the road. They're a good road team. And you saw it here in Lloyd that they're tough to beat on the road.
All right, guys, how about moving on to the NHL? The playoffs culminating or will be a little bit more clear. We still have a few teams that have to decide where they're going. Of course, a couple Canadian teams out. But
Couple.
Well, you still have Toronto barely hanging on.
6 out.
I'm saying Toronto's
They're
hanging
done.
on by
They're done.
They're
already.
done.
No, they're done.
They're done.
Mathematically, they're still there, so we're keeping it that
Yes,
way, guys.
What,
TSN,
Sports
they're
Club
still there.
stats having under 1% right now?
Hey, you know what? You're saying there's a chance. Lloyd Christmas said it best. But I do want to actually get back on track, guys. I do want to talk about
Dumber. Really?
It's a classic
Dumb
movie.
and Dumber.
Don't
It's
call
a
it classic.
It's
Don't
classic
call it,
and funny. I'm not saying it's.
No,
Oh, we're getting way off topic,
We're
guys. Let's
so
get back
off
on topic, boys. Oh, my goodness. Okay, NHL playoffs. I want to talk about the 4 wildcard teams that are currently in position. That's Dallas and Minnesota in the West, Columbus, Detroit in the East. Who has the better chance of moving further on into the playoffs?
I'll go with Minnesota, considering just the matchups. Well, in the East, you have Detroit, who's beaten up and hurt, trying to scratch
They're
their way
starting
into
to get
the
healthy, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, they've been battling, right? They're pretty much been in playoffs for the last month or so. They're taking on, well, they would take on Pittsburgh, and Crosby and Malkin, and hopefully Fleury might show up. I don't know, but I give the edge to Pittsburgh there. And then Columbus, well, they've only been in the show once, so you got to give Boston, who's running ship right now, and then Dallas would be taking on, who is it, St. Louis?
Yeah.
St. Louis is unreal, so just by process of elimination, you got to go with Minnesota.
Yeah,
And Ducks, I got to mention Ducks. Sorry, when you have Ducks who are coached by Bruce Boudreau, who can coach in the playoffs, there's a sunken ship right there.
Yeah. Well, I would say out of that Detroit, they get Pavel back in the lineup. He's going to be healthy somewhat. Zetterberg's going to be back in the lineup.
Zetterberg won't be back till round 3 if they make it that far. So
But you never know. You get good, hot goaltending. Fleury's still a bit of a question mark in the head when it comes to the postseason.
Well,
You
don't
talk
get me
about
wrong,
guys, right? I
yeah.
think Detroit might have the better advantage out of all the teams there.
Yeah, and Columbus too. I kind of like Columbus for the simple fact they're playing the good hockey at the right time of the season, and thank God for them. Toronto's not going to be in the playoffs because I'm so sick of Toronto made it to the playoffs. There's certain network that just jams the Maple Leafs down your throat night after night after night. So let's be done with it.
Okay, how about Northwestern saying they're done with the way they've been treated? Of course, the football program being given permission by a judge to unionize. They do have a vote coming up, and it looks like they're actually going to be one of the first programs to ever unionize, setting a definite precedent and providing a little pressure to the NCAA. Are student athletes unionizing the way of the future now in college athletics in the States?
it depends what they're going to. Is it about money? Is it about hours? And that's what. And I
They're
tried.
spending a lot of time on the football field, in the gym, on the court, whatever sport they're playing. They're spending, I bet you, 60 to 70% of their time there, right?
Depends how they govern this. I know I saw a few reports on the weekend, and some reports talked about the money. And the money the NCAA makes off these athletes and the athletes get, it's billions.
Ridiculous.
But if they're going to fight about that, there's going to be a huge fight, and it's going to last for a long time before it gets resolved. But if they're just fighting about hours of practice, and trying to break that up a little bit more and make it not so much of a job for these guys, then I don't have a problem with it. But when it comes down to money now, the schools aren't going to roll over.
Pretty much hit it on the head right there.
You guys don't see unions becoming a precedent, or maybe say to avoid putting in a union, you'll start seeing Northwestern, which does have a lot of money, they are a private school, to maybe say, you know what, we'll provide you certain amenities so this won't happen. Do you see that being in the future to avoid this whole union sense, right? The whole union talk.
I can't see it.
I can't see it. Way back in the day, like even before me, they had college. College sports was professional, and professional was guys that actually had jobs and played football. It was the college guys that actually made the money. And it's kind of the same way now. It's the college guys should be getting paid to a certain extent because they're making a bunch of money off their backs.
According to Fox Sports' Ken Rosenthal, we'll get to this really quickly, a couple members of the Toronto Blue Jays were willing to defer payments so they could bring in pitcher Ervin Santana. That didn't happen, signing a one-year, $14 million deal, which, by the way, Alex Anthopoulos, the Jays GM, offered to Santana, ended up taking that same deal but going to Atlanta. What were some of the reasons for Santana's decision, and do you feel that maybe playing in Canada could have been an issue, or was it just strictly, I don't know, division? Guys, can you explain this at all?
Well, you're looking at two teams. You got the Toronto Blue Jays and you got the Atlanta Braves. Where would you rather go? I'd rather go play with the Braves. They did have a good pitching staff before both top pitchers went down. They got a great franchise. They got great history. I would rather go to the Braves than the Blue Jays at the end of the day.
And don't let it fool you. Playing on this side of the 49th is a big difference for a lot of those players. You even relate it back to the National Hockey League. There's a reason why there's only one Canadian team in the playoffs. Why there's not big-name free agents coming on this side of the 49th and rather play in the U.S. Same thing in baseball.
All right, guys. When we come back, thanks a lot for that. When we come back, we're going to have over-under and a special couple topics here, especially for Matt Choumont, who's a golf aficionado, coming up next.